share this program, help us push back against the ever-moving Liberal agenda. If you can't watch or listen to it right this second, you can download it, listen to it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it. It is out there. And without further ado, we have Pierre Poilievre, the Member of Parliament for Carleton. He's also the Shadow Minister for Finance, coming back on the show to talk about Justinflation.
Great to be with you.
Well, this is something that I think a lot of people were looking forward to because they've seen your performance in the House of Commons lately, and they can see that you are pushing back on something many of the so-called experts in the media seem to want to talk away over and over again, that it's not even happening, like it doesn't exist.
Well, that's the irony, is that all of the same experts who claimed that COVID would cause deflation now blame it for inflation. All of the so-called experts who told us inflation would never happen now claim to be able to tell us why it's happening. Of course, these people are motivated by their ideology rather than the economic sciences. I was able to predict this inflation back in May of 2020, over a year ago, for a very simple reason. I saw the amount of money the government was printing, and I knew that it would lead to inflation, as it always does. And sure enough, here we are. We have the second highest inflation in the G20, higher than many non-G20 countries as well: Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, Singapore, South Korea, India, China, Japan, Australia, Germany, Netherlands, Italy, France, UK, and countless other countries they printed less money and they have less inflation. But of course, here in Canada, we followed the ridiculous example of the Americans, who run these god-awful deficits and pay for it with printed Federal Reserve money. And of course, we're getting the same result. We join with the Americans to have among the highest inflation in the developed world.
Well, since you did talk about the Americans, we have a graphic here from the Federal Reserve Bank in St. Louis, basically talking about the joys of rationing when they should be looking after the inflation crisis that they created. We also have been dealing with this for quite some time, the housing crisis that has been slowly creeping up. And I'm going to post a graphic too that was you posted actually on your social media that showed that when the crisis hit, when the pandemic hit, prices actually dropped for a few months. But you can explain it better than I can. What triggered that huge and continuing rise in house prices?
Well, you're quite right. Housing prices should have dropped during COVID. Why? Because wages with which you buy houses dropped, and immigration was reduced to almost zero, also cutting demand. So you would expect that house prices would actually moderate. In fact, they did for a few months in March and April of 2020. Then the federal government began printing cash like crazy, flooding the financial market with $400 billion of newly created money. That money starts in the financial system and it trickles down. And mortgage lending went up by 60% to home buyers and 100% to investors, which ballooned demand and increased housing prices by over a third in that time. So we have a massive house price inflation that is the result of the same cause of all inflation, which is more money chasing fewer goods, which leads to higher prices.
So the government's answer to this seems to be, hey, we're coming up with a daycare program. So the failure of the government to solve a program is another government program. And here we go again, more deficit finance, because the planners, every time the plans fail, the planners will keep planning, says Ronald Reagan.
That's right. They caused a housing crisis by flooding the market with cheap cash and ballooning and inflating house prices. And then they say, well, this is more proof that we need a government program to solve the problem that government caused. What else is new? It's as though that more of the disease is the cure. No, of course not. The answer is less of the disease, which means stop printing cash, stop flooding our financial and mortgage markets with easy money so that house prices can moderate and people can afford to buy a home.
I know you have to go because you have a speech at 1:40. That's why we started a little early. So I'll just quickly go on this about the oil and gas. What we do in Canada is some of the best in the world. We have Joe Biden in the United States, the president of the United States, begging OPEC countries to increase their production. When we have, what's the first thing he did? He canceled Keystone XL. So I don't understand how, when we're being warned about shortages and price increases in our natural resources and our energy, the idea now for Joe Biden is to raid the strategic stockpile of reserves, which has to be replenished. Instead of begging OPEC, I don't know how importing OPEC oil makes everything green. It just doesn't make any sense. You have a domestic supply. You have Canada with a supply. Let's be energy independent in North America.
Yeah, that is the irony, that while Biden begs OPEC for oil and has dipped in to take out 50 million barrels of oil from the U.S. strategic reserves, Trudeau couldn't convince him to approve a pipeline from Canada. I don't think Trudeau could convince the thirsty in a desert to take fresh water for free. It ought to have been that easy to convince the Americans to get that pipeline built. But what do you know? Another failure to defend our workers and our jobs, even in a time when our neighbors are using more and more oil.
All right, Pierre, I know you have to run downstairs to the chamber here. What's the solution here? I always give the guests the last word. Maybe you can talk about what Conservatives would do differently, what we can do to help slow the inflation. I know we're not in power, but what would we be offering Canadians to slow this mad inflation rise that we have?
Well, stop pouring gasoline on the fire. When you print money and run deficits, you cause the inflationary fire to burn hotter and bigger. And that's what this government is doing. And so that's the first thing. Instead of creating cash, let's start creating more of what cash buys. Build pipelines to create and transport more affordable energy. Unleash our builders to produce more affordable housing. Get the carbon tax and other red tape off our farmers to grow more affordable and nutritious food. In other words, make more, cost less, paychecks, not debt.
I love it, Pierre. You do have a speech at 1:40, so I will let you go. Justin Trudeau talks often about build back better. I think we should just build something. That would be nice.
Anything.
Thank you very much. I would love more time with you, but I understand the speech got moved around. You have to go. Thank you very much for your time. We'll have him back to talk more in depth about these issues, about the spiraling Justinflation, #Justinflation. If you want to listen to Pierre's speech, he's going to give it in about 7 minutes time in the House of Commons. I'm sure it'll be up on his social media feed. Please check that out.
Jamie, yes. Jamie, tell your listeners as well that they should take pictures of exorbitant prices that have resulted from inflation, post it online with the hashtag Justinflation.
That's a fantastic idea.
Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone. Great to be with you. Love the podcast, Jamie.
Thank you, Pierre, for being a guest. Right. We appreciate your time. Hopefully you're not too out of breath running down to the chamber.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Pierre has a great idea. Please check that out. Please post what you're seeing in the price increases. It could be everyday items. It could be a variety of things. Please post that with the hashtag Justinflation. We'll start to show that what the government is doing is actually causing the problem on funneling all this cheap money into the system. So we'll talk more about that in a future episode. We've got lots more going on. Pierre's just going to the House to do a speech on this, Justinflation. We do thank you for joining us. We'll have new content every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. We did start a bit early. We do apologize, but of course, things get moved around and Pierre had to move his time and when he was speaking. Again, check that out. Question period is at 2:15 in the House of Commons. Always a great time when you're questioning the Liberals and trying to push back. And as I said, fight back against the ever-moving Liberal agenda. Again, if you can like, comment, subscribe, share this program, we would appreciate that. We know there's someone in your social media network that would be open to hearing this message, and this is good content. They definitely are not getting in the mainstream media. If you can't listen to it, download it later on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. It is out there. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That is the blueprint.